All righty. Well, I see that it is 5 o'clock. And while we may still have some other people joining us, I don't want to penalize the prompt. So we'll go ahead and get going here. Just a couple of quick sort of housekeeping things. We will be going through different sections of the budget, and we will pause from time to time to take questions. So if you have a question before we take our pause, and you're afraid you won't remember it, feel free to put it in the chat. And then we will get to it at the next time that we take a break. Otherwise than that, if you could just hang on to your questions until we take a break. We'll go through the revenues first, and then pretty much all of the expenses except the staffing expenses. And then we'll go through the staffing plan and the staffing expenses. So we'll have sort of those three sections. And after each of those sections, we'll take a pause in case anybody has any questions. So I think that's really all I have for housekeeping. And with that, I will turn it over to Bishop Sally French.
Thank you, Phyllis. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining us tonight for this, the last of our 5 pre-convention budget hearings. Appreciate your presence. At this point, I think we hopefully have figured out how to anticipate some of the questions and responses that might be helpful, but it's always good to hear if new ones come up along the way. And it's especially helpful for us as we prepare for the December 9th special convention for the purpose of the budget. I'm going to open us with a prayer. I'm going to use a slightly amended version of the prayer for the diocese from the Book of Common Prayer. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. O God, by your grace, you have called us in this diocese to a goodly fellowship of faith. Bless our clergy and lay leaders and all our people. Grant that your word may be truly preached and truly heard, your sacraments faithfully administered and faithfully received. By your Spirit, fashion our lives according to the example of your Son, and grant that we may show the power of your love to all among whom we live, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you very much. As our treasurer, Jonathan Gloucester, is traveling today, I will be taking care of the budget presentations, except for the staffing part. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen, and we will get started. Let me get to the point where I can see what I need to see. So again, as I mentioned, we'll start with the revenue side of things. And the column that we're looking at here is the 2024 revised budget column. This is the column that has the numbers that we'll actually be working with. So we start with our marks of mission giving, as always. And this number that we have here currently is based on the responses that we've had so far to our marks of mission giving ask. What we do, obviously, there's some estimation necessary because we don't have all of the pledges in yet. But what we do is we take the numbers from the pledge responses that we've received, and where we haven't yet received responses, we take the numbers from what was pledged the year before to come up with the estimate of what this number will be. So you can see that this number actually has gone up a little bit from what our 2023 approved budget was, just a slight amount, almost break even, but a little bit in the positive direction. So that is in and of itself a good trend to see. Our trust income that we have here is based on the dividends that we anticipate from our trust funds. And as you can see, they have decreased from 2023, which has been a part of a trend that has been going on for a while as we continue to use our trust funds. And obviously, when we have to take distributions from our trust funds, then we have less principal to have dividends paid out on. So that amount has decreased since last year. And then perhaps the biggest change that we have is in the amount of trustee grants that we are requesting from our trustees of diocesan trust funds for ministry support. These two line items last year, or this current year, I guess I should say, totaled about $1.3 million, which, we knew to be an extremely unsustainable rate. And we were working very hard to see if we could reduce that amount. Even when we put our 2024 preliminary budget together last year, we anticipated that, we really wanted to try to work it down to just over $800,000. And actually this year we were able to work it down to just under $735,000. So that is definitely a trend in the right direction. We'd like to see it continue to trend downward until the point where we do not have anything that we're taking as distributions over and above the actual dividends that come from our trust funds. So we will continue to work on that. So altogether, that gives us a budget of just under $4 million, which again is significantly down from where we were in 2023 and even what we had preliminarily thought we would be at for 2024. A significant part of that is due to the fact that in 2023, we had a number of staff positions where we had people retiring, so there were overlaps. And then we also had the $110,000 for the remainder of the Episcopal search and transition in 2023 that obviously we do not have in 2024. So before I move on anywhere else, does anybody have any questions about that? Alrighty, not seeing any. We will move into the expense portion of our budget. And moving first into our diocesan priorities, we have first off our mission congregations, our support for our mission congregations, which we had $570,500 in our 2023 approved budget, and then had asked the Board of Missions to try to hold that number to $475,000 for the 2024 budget. No easy task. And I am going to ask Paul Wolfgang, who's with us tonight, if he could share with us a little bit more about that process. Paul?
Yes, thank you. For those who don't know, the Board of Missions is an organization based on representatives from each of our convocations. Each convocation elects 2 members, 1 lay and 1 clergy. And also there's the provision that one of those 2 should represent a mission congregation within their convocation. There also are appointments from the Diocesan Council and appointments by the bishop. The Board of Missions received over $800,000 worth of requests for 2024, and we carefully reviewed them. We gave significant priority to congregations that showed substantial growth in missional work. But it was still very difficult, as we learned yesterday and today. All congregations are viable. All congregations need to grow, but we had limited resources. And rather than just sort of, as someone says, peanut buttering the requests, which would give everybody insufficient kind of report, we did in fact keep the allocation to the $475,000 figure, actually a bit less than that. And that will be presented to Diocesan Council this coming Tuesday, where we will see the actual details. Unfortunately, some congregations which were expecting significant support will not be getting that. And the bishop is going to be, hopefully has talked to them already about their future. And we're going to, again, hold hold fast that, again, all congregations are viable and need support and deserve growth, but we do have these limited resources, so we did have to make some fairly tough decisions in deciding where to allocate our funds.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul. And again, we have want to express our deep appreciation for all of the people who serve on the Board of Missions, as well as our Finance and Budget Committee, who work very thoughtfully, in a very discerning kind of a way, to make a lot of very tough decisions. And so just wanted to, lift up those groups and ask you to keep them in your prayers also, and with prayers of thanksgiving for the work that we do. And so then moving along into our next line item, which is the amount that we give towards the support of the Episcopal Church. You'll notice that there is a significant decrease there from the amount that we had originally anticipated. And I would like to ask Bishop French if she would like to speak to that a little bit more, as well as if there are any other comments that you wanted to make about our mission congregation.
Thank you very much, Canon Jones. I appreciate so much the work of the Board of Missions on this. It was difficult conversations, recognizing that one of our challenges is that a significant portion of our diocesan operating budget goes to support the mission congregations of the diocese and others that are in some form of need in various ways. Not only is there the funding through the Board of Missions process, there's also several other processes that provide funding support that don't necessarily appear in the budget, but the needs for support are substantial, and the work that was done was really faithful and hard work to assess the places where we believe that the funding will be most meaningful and supportive, given that we have limited amounts available and we are at a time of significant financial pressure right now. That gap between what we've been spending and what we have to spend for the past few years, for the past couple of years, has been the average is well over $1 million. And that's one of the reasons why the investment income is decreasing at this rate. Difficult decisions have had to be made. But I also will tell you that I am committed to ensuring that if any decision has an impact on the employment status of a clergy person, that we have and we will work towards ensuring that everyone is offered an opportunity for employment at the same level. So if someone has a full-time position and a decrease in funding means there's no longer a full-time position, we will ensure, and we have ensured, that folks have been offered other possibilities at an equal level of employment. So there is no impact to the clergy leadership in our congregations as much as there will be. Well, there's no impact in terms of employment as much as some of these decisions are challenging, but I think necessary at this time. In terms of the funds to the Episcopal Church, the amount that they actually requested from us, it's a formula. It's 15% of our income. I think it's income. It might be operating budget, but it's 15% above 200,000. And for 2024, the number they finally came back to us with was 599,567, I believe. It was certainly over 599.5. And so in looking at that number and in looking at the amount that we are drawing down from our reserves and our trusts and our endowments, we recognize the Episcopal Church, like the diocese, provides the opportunity for dioceses to request relief, just as we provide the opportunity for congregations to request relief in their marks of mission giving. And so we made the decision that we would enter into that process and request relief of about 50% for this year. So we, instead of almost 600, are setting the number at 300, 400,000 next year, 500,000 the year after, and a return to the full number in 2027. What this does is it enables us to stabilize and find our footing. The Episcopal Church does ask both that you demonstrate need, and we certainly have that given the budgets we've had for the past couple of years, and also that you demonstrate plans and a process to move to a more stable financial footing where you'll be able to return as a diocese to the givings that are appropriate. And we have that as well in several ways. One is this budget process that allows us really to consolidate and diminish some of the overages in some substantial ways. The decrease of almost 600,000 from the previous year's budget is significant. There's also, though, we do have to do some work to raise our income over time, and there's a few different ways to do that. Next year, we'll spend some time looking at sources of funding. As a diocese, we don't have high levels of reserves given our size and given our geography. It makes sense that we might want to look at some kind of capital development funding work, and we're probably going to have to use consultants, because if we knew how to do that ourselves, I suspect we would have raised that money over time plenty of years ago. But that's one way we can look at it. There's other ways to reflect on, raising the income in our congregations helps, because that increases the income in the marks of mission giving. And we also have some other resources that we can look at how we are best engaging what we have in the support of God's mission. I feel good about this request. It's the kind of thing that you do in a situation of need, but it provides us with a process, actually. The question has been raised, well, if we're not giving our full asking to the Episcopal Church, then won't our congregations not give the same to us? And I think that is perhaps, it actually gives us a process where we haven't had one before. The marks of mission giving is no longer an optional request. It is actually canonically required. But of course, that process came into place in, I think it was 2019, and the Board of Consultation was the instrument that was intended to be the place where those conversations would take place. But then in 2020, everything changed. And so that process was never fully implemented. With this engagement with the Episcopal Church, it gives us the ability to really express that we understand the challenges that congregations go through. It gives us the ability to be in, I think, genuine, faithful, and helpful dialogue with our worshiping communities, and to see what's possible for them and for us. So I don't think it's going to diminish our effectiveness in that area in our congregation. And I will say that while we haven't talked about this before, in fact, the diocese has done this before. What we're doing now is we're raising it up as something that we want to acknowledge. We want to be clear about our financial situation, the challenges, and the places where we're finding relief and possibility. We're part of a wider church, and there's times when we'll need the wider church to carry us. And in terms of the financial reality for next year, this is certainly one of those times. I think that allows us long-term to be full, active, and healthy partners as part of the Episcopal Church. And I believe this is the right decision, but I'd welcome questions, feedback, responses from folks. If you have them if you've got something you're wondering about, please ask right now. We'd be happy to respond and let you know how we came to that decision and what it might mean going forward.
Does anybody have any questions, anything you'd like to ask or comment about before we move on? I see in the chat, Canon Jones, in what time frame should the mission congregations expect to hear their budgeted amounts for 2024? As soon as the budget is passed by diocesan council, God willing, on Tuesday, then we would pass that information back to the Board of Missions, and between the Board of Missions and the Finance Office, we would make sure that letters go out to the mission congregations with the amounts that are being awarded. And then I see also in the chat, are you saying that the amount expected is now mandatory? Yes. Actually, the amount expected has been mandatory as far as our canons are concerned since about 2018, which was the time in which we put the process together with anticipating the Board of Consultation to meet with congregations in very much the same process that the Episcopal Church has for dioceses. So what we are doing right now is actually pretty effectively modeling what we want our congregations to be doing in relationship with us And as of the beginning part of next year, right in January of 2024, our intent is to restart the Board of Consultations process so that congregations who are currently not meeting their full diocesan ask can enter into the same kind of a process that we are going to be entering into with the Episcopal Church. And I see Jocelyn White, you've got your hand raised. Please feel free to ask your questions.
I'd be happy to field that one. I think it's the question in the chat box about the anti-racism funding. Mm-hmm. That amount was decreased because that was what they requested for all of our ministries that support anti-racism and the ministries that support congregations of color, not just anti-racism, but the COBM and similar. The numbers that were requested were the numbers that were placed in the budget.
And the other thing, I just want to make sure that we're all looking at the right column of numbers, because this is our 2024 revised budget, and our anti-racism budget actually increased. So that was the next section that I was going to get into. So for 2023, our anti-racism budget was $11,650. We had initially anticipated in a preliminary budget, and again, this was, as Bishop French quite accurately said, numbers that were given to us by the Anti-Racism Commission, but then they further revised the numbers later, so there actually is an increase to the 2024 anti-racism budget.
There is another question in the chat. Is the diocese now experiencing the COVID fallout that our parishes have already been dealing with? The answer to that is yes. We have been with you with that all the way through. We recognize that the patterns are ups and downs, and that our way of gathering information looks at a historic window of 3 years and not simply the exact current number. And that's one of the reasons why there is a process around allowing for relief in this work.
Any other questions about this area before we move on? All right, moving into the next section, the next section of our diocesan priorities in social and ethnic ministry. Again, we talked about anti-racism already. Many of the line items here did not experience really significant change one way or the other, but did have some small increases. And I did see there's another question in the chat, which I'll deal with as soon as I get through this section. So we can see here that we had basically the global development goals had a slight decrease from 16,000 to 15,000. And again, these are numbers that were at the request of these groups themselves. And we had a slight increase in our archival expenses. Many people are not aware of the critical and faithful work that Ken and Richard Reed does to help maintain our diocesan archives, a job that is only growing as churches close, making sure that the information that comes from those churches is properly kept and cataloged. He is the one who responds to inquiries about baptismal records, funeral records, wedding records, all of those kinds of things. And really does it. It's a labor of love for him, and we are blessed to have him, having him taking care of that responsibility. So we felt as though we did need to increase the amount for archival expenses to at least partially, allow for the increase in the work that's going on. We had a slight decrease in ministry with older adults, a slight increase in Jubilee ministries, slight decrease on the Reparations Commission, and then holding steady on the Commission on Black Ministry. Again, in both of those areas as a result of the requests of those groups themselves. So they did receive what they asked for.
Just one quick clarification, we did on a couple of instances move funding down by 1,000 or so, simply because this is a really tight budget and it makes a difference. In a couple of places, we were able to see opportunities where funds perhaps hadn't been used in previous years. Some of the ministries that haven't been active for several years and didn't even put in budget requests went from 500 to 200, because we want to keep a placeholder there for the potential for that work to continue, but recognize that it hasn't happened this year or really since COVID in several areas. And a couple of our global ministries did the funding that was requested. We felt we were not able to expand offerings at this time.
And so again, along with that, I did see Jocelyn's question just pop up in the chat. There's a decrease in the funding for the Reparations Commission and the Commission on Black Ministry. Why? These are the amounts that those groups requested. So they were not requesting funding at the same level that they requested it in prior years. We responded with a 100% award of the amounts that they requested. So
is there a representative of either of those ministries on that would be willing to speak to the group about why the requests were lower? I have some thoughts, but I'd like to hear from the folks who put the requests in if possible. Okay. There's a couple of questions that we missed further up. One related to that is, do we know why anti-racism has requested more funding? I believe the answer to that is that we, okay, thank you. The short response to the first question is that they hadn't used all the funds budgeted. So it's a responsible and good stewardship to allow the ministries to continue at the rate and for us to fund them at the rate needed. In terms of anti-racism training, our anti-racism training is strong and it is thriving. We are finding an increased need to provide it in Spanish. That costs more money because we sometimes need translators to provide translation services for the instructors. And we are also starting to look at things like considering programs that would allow people to renew their anti-racism training certification without necessarily participating in the full 20-hour course again, or other possibilities to expand in different directions in what's being offered to strengthen it for people. It really is a strong ministry. It trains a number of people. They train a number of people every year, and it makes sense, especially given the increased presence of Spanish offerings, that there would be more funding required. There was a question further back. What are the repercussions?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm not sure, MOGM, is that the...
That's the marks of mission giving, yeah. So, but I did want to ask Jane, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself, when you say what are the repercussions, could you clarify that question for me a little bit?
I just want to know if there is some sort of, I don't know, sanction against parishes that don't meet their asking.
Okay, so that's what I thought you meant, but I wanted to make sure before I just assumed something I shouldn't. And yes, there are within the canons. The thing that you would notice in the canons is that we focus mostly on the Board of Missions process because we value the relationships that we have with our congregations. And so we want to make sure that what we're doing here is really focusing on this as a process of either, continuing to be in, or in some cases, perhaps even building relationships so that we can understand better the challenges that our congregations are having. So the only, what you would call sanctions that are anticipated in the canons are for congregations which refuse to engage in that process. So if a congregation isn't making its asking and they actually refuse to participate in good faith with the Board of Consultation, then the Board of Consultation can recommend that representatives from that congregation meet with diocesan council. And based on the outcome of that meeting, diocesan council does have the authority to remove voice and vote from convention, at convention from those congregations. And so, but again, I really would want to emphasize that is for congregations which actually refuse the Board of Consultation process and refuse to be in conversation with us or work with us on the exact kind of plan that we will be working on with the Episcopal Church to get from wherever they may happen to be in their marks of mission giving to the full asking. So I hope that answers your question.
That does. Thank you very much.
Can I just add quickly? I know it's hard. I know some of our congregations are really struggling and that the givings that are offered feel sacrificial. We want to be in good and right relationship with you. We don't want to be, the tax collector. Our goal is strong congregations. Our goal is a healthy church, places where communities can thrive and flourish. So these processes and steps are intended to ensure that we have in place what we need to support our congregations when there are financial challenges, and to ensure that the diocese is equipped to do the work that we do to support you. I think that we're still, even though the canonical changes happened 5 or 6 years ago now, we're still very much, because of COVID, we really haven't lived into them at all. So we'll be working it out as we go forward. But my hope and my desire, my intention, and my expectation is that it is going to be a positive for us and not a negative. It is going to be a place of collaboration and connection and not division.
Thank you. The one other thing I guess I would just add in closing on that one also is that that was part of the reason why also within the canonical changes, the Board of Consultation itself is given the authority to reduce the asking itself, so that when we are in conversation with congregations and we're learning about what their financial realities are and the things that they're going through, the reduction of the ask is a reflection of the fact that we are hearing, what's going on within congregations, so that whatever number is eventually agreed to, then the congregation can feel very good about the fact that they are making that entire asking, and they are satisfying 100% of what's being asked of them, as a part of that process. So again, just another area in which, when this was all put together, the folks who were working on it were just very focused on the fact that this is very much about relationships and us being in right relationship with each other. So, moving on then a little bit further on into our youth and young adult activities. This amount in the budget was reduced from $35,000 down to $30,000 in consultation with the person who's going to be helping to lead our youth activities moving forward. And you'll hear a little bit more about that when we get into our staffing realignment. There are some changes that have been made in the way that the youth ministry is going to be handled, and I'm going to leave that to Bishop French to talk a little bit more about when we go into the staffing part of it. This part that you see here does not have anything to do with the staffing. This is the program funding for youth ministry, and also for the young adult ministry. So that will be talked about a little bit later on in conjunction with the staffing changes. Likewise, in the area of congregational development, there was a $20,000 reduction in the program portion of this budget, but again, that has an offset in, not necessarily a literal offset, but that also it has some relevance to the staffing changes and realignments that we anticipate as we look to find different ways to better support our congregations on the ground with staffing support. So again, you'll hear a little bit more about that as we get into the staffing portion. Our pastoral response, which you may remember in prior years we have called parish crisis response. We had reduced that budget in anticipation, again, of the fact that some of the other, again, staffing support and realignment that we have will enable us to work more closely with our congregations so that we don't necessarily have to do things like bring in consultants for, conflicts or things like that this budget line item used to be used for. So that is the reason for the decrease in the pastoral response line item. And then in the area of stewardship, we're still staying level there. Lifelong Christian formation and adult Christian formation also have ties to the staffing realignment that I referred to before. So even though there's a slight decrease in the lifelong Christian formation, we did add adult Christian formation as a separate line item with its own $3,000 budget. The Commission on Liturgy and Music stayed level, as did Ministry with the Disabled. And recovery ministries, as you can see, there's nothing actually that has been spent to date with recovery ministries. That group's activities have been much reduced. And so we did want to leave a placeholder in the budget for in case they do decide to do the service that they've done in the past. But it was reduced from the $500 that we had from the year before down to $200. Moving further into our ministry development section, Committee on the Priesthood, we have left level. The budget has remained level at the amount that it was prior. As some of you may be aware, we have put a temporary pause on the process right now, but we do anticipate that once the groups actually who work with this process work through the things that they'd like to work through in the process, that we will be, back to a very strong program for ordination to the priesthood, and also are anticipating perhaps even increased numbers. We've had some high level of interest from our communities of color in lifting up people for the process, so that once we get back on track, we may actually experience an increase in that. So with all of those moving parts, we left the amount level at the amount that it was for 2023. The internship program is one of the things that did suffer with COVID. As you can see, there were no actual expenses, which this was typically a summer program, so there will be no actual expenses for 2023. However, we do anticipate, again, that program coming more back towards a normal level in 2024, and we wanted to provide for that. Clergy development, clergy days is staying level, as is Fresh Start, and we did have a bit of a decrease in the transition ministry program budget, again tied to some of the staffing realignment that we'll be talking about in a few minutes. Our School for Ministry, again, this is another one. I know I'm sounding like a broken record here, but this is another one that's also tied to the staffing realignment. And this, again, the program, the amount that we have here, which does show a tiny bit of an increase, is more tied to the program budget. The School for Ministry is also going to become a very important vehicle for us, even more important as time goes on. It already has been a very significant program for us, to be able to work with people who are in discernment of any kind, whether it's for lay leadership, diaconal ministry, or for the ordained priesthood. And so we really are blessed and pleased to have had Jen Bishop working with this program for as long as we have, to build it to the level that it currently is. And I know that Bishop French will be talking a little bit more about that when she goes through the staffing realignment changes as to the vision for what that's going to become moving forward, or what we envision moving forward. Committee on the Diaconate and Deacons Council, both of them show slight decreases, but again, in line with what those groups had actually requested. Moving into the diocesan gatherings, we've left our $20,000 revised budget at a level with what it was in 2023. As you see here, we will overrun it. We expect to overrun it a little bit this year. Most of that had to do with some equipment, one-time equipment charges that we incurred over at the cathedral earlier this year to try to, as we were seeking to try to help them upgrade the system that we currently use for them to be able to live stream and present at the cathedral during our convention. So that was a one-time expense we don't expect to repeat. And that's why we left it level at what it was before. Clergy conference also still level at $5,000. Lay leader conferences also. Lambeth is an accrual that we make. Lambeth happens once every 10 years. So rather than having us incur all of that expense in the year that it happens, we accrue for it evenly over time. And so that's the $1,000 that you see. The College for Bishops and House of Bishops amount increases slightly for 2024, just due to anticipated travel for not just House of Bishops, but College for Bishops also has some activities that are required for new bishops to attend. And so there's a bit of added cost there for Bishop French to be able to attend those events. Bishop Stokes did the same thing in his first 3 years as a bishop. And so we wanted to make provision for that. And then the General Convention, ECW, Triennium, and the Deputies of Color Conference. This is a very unusual year in that we are not budgeting anything for the current year for 2024 for General Convention, even though 2024 is the year when General Convention will happen. As we went through all of our calculations and worked with the General Convention deputation on the budget, what we found is that the amounts, we typically accrue amounts for 3 years for a General Convention. So what typically happens is for the 2024 General Convention, we would have been accruing amounts in 2022, 2023, and then there would have been an amount in 2024. All 3 of those years would add up to the total that we would have anticipated spending in 2024. So when we had the delay of the 2021 General Convention into 2022, and then that General Convention ended up being so much more reduced in scope, we did not need all of the money that we had accrued for the 2021 convention to pay for the 2021 convention. So we had some money left over from that accrual, as well as the 2022 accrual and the 2023 accrual, which you can see right here, the $25,000. And with all of that together, it completely offset the amount that we anticipated needing based on the deputation's calculations of expenses for the 2024 General Convention. So as weird as it looks, that's why there's a 0 in this line right here. In the programs and covenants, again, most of this is pretty much level. There was a slight reduction in the amount for the companion diocese. We can see that we've had reduced levels of activity. And again, this is still, one of those things that's still coming out of COVID. Some of the levels of activity that we previously had maintaining our relationship with the companion diocese have taken a while to come back. And so that's why there's still a bit of a reduced amount for the companion diocese in 2024 as compared to 2023. So we'll, and then we'll just have to see as time goes on how that activity builds up. On the Episcopal Mental and Spiritual Health Ministry, this was a ministry that actually came out of COVID. One that we first started in conjunction with the Diocese of Newark, and then they actually had discontinued it, and then we continued to provide the support in the form of what they call the warm line to support, especially for clergy, who had been going through incredible amounts of stress as we had to pivot in a bunch of different directions to deal with all of the ramifications of switching over to online worship and everything else that was going on. They eventually also expanded the program to lay leadership. But now that we are looking again at some of the added positions that will come as part of the staffing realignment, we see this ministry going in a bit of a different direction. And so at this point in time, we wanted to provide $1,000 for 2024 for it to basically be able to gradually wind down so it can still provide support to people while they need it, while we're getting the rest of the program and the staffing to support it in place. And so I am going to then skip over all of the diocesan staff sections here for now, and go down into our section on diocesan obligations. The search committee and the transition committee need for those is done. So there are no amounts that are shown here for either of those. Our insurance and bonding, audit and legal is still maintaining at prior levels. Property maintenance, we felt as though we needed an increase in that to reflect the ever increasing cost of maintaining diocesan house. Utilities, really running about the same. Capital improvements, equipment, furniture, telephone, office supplies, printing and postage, all of these really remaining, at the levels that they were. We did have an increase in the amount that we require for IT maintenance and support. Some of that has to do with we did have a switch in our IT services provider. And there was a certain amount that we have had to pay and have to pay out over time to cancel our contract with the prior IT services provider that has been built into the amount that shows on that particular line item. And then there's also some part in there that is that assists with the support for our accounting functions. The software that we have there. So that was the amount, that was what was behind the increase there. Leased equipment stays the same, computer software and supplies stays the same. And then finally, just our general obligations with our health insurance for our retired clergy, widows, and orphans still staying at the same level, and amounts that we make available from the retired clergy fund and Widows and Orphans Fund for special needs that may come up, also remaining the same. And so with all of that together, again, we have our balanced budget of just under $4 million. So before we move on to a deeper dive into the staffing realignment and those related costs, does anybody have any questions, comments about anything that was in the parts of the budget that I just reviewed? Okie doke.
Thank you for sharing that, Canon Jones. That it reflects tremendous faithful and hard work on the part of the Budget and Finance Committee and the Treasurer. And it really, I think, is a good reflection of who we are and the ministries we want to support, and also our pressing need for some fiscal limitation on some of the spending. I wish we were able to continue everything at the levels that we'd like to, but the reality is that a deficit of drawing down our reserves, of almost over 700,000 a year, 800,000 a year, 900, is just not sustainable. If we want to be strong in the future, we're going to have to make some difficult decisions now. The next part of our presentation is about the staffing and the staff restructuring that is currently underway. The short form version of that is that we are able to expand the outward-facing staff, the support for congregations, the people that our clergy and our lay leaders will see in active ministry roles, being present, turning up, and doing things in a variety of different ways. We're able to expand those positions and also decrease our overall spending on staffing. We were able to bring into this budget, it reflects some positions that had been funded outside of the budget, bringing them into the budget. So we actually have a clearer idea of who is staff and how we're supporting them, and how we, as a diocese, how we can recognize the full picture of our diocesan investment in people and ministries and skills. And so even with bringing some new positions in and expanding some of our positions, by making some shifts in a few other positions, and by eliminating a couple of positions that were quite expensive but were not necessarily meeting certain needs in our structure, institutional structure. This isn't about the people, but about the ministries. It looks like we'll be able to actively and offering a staff cost of living increase for next year of 3.2%, which is the number that was the IRS number when we when we were doing, I'm not sure what the number is now, but that was the number that when we were doing it for 2023 for now. Knowing that last year staff did not receive a cost of living increase, even though the inflation rate was 8%, which is an awfully high number. So that 3.2 offsets that somewhat, and allows us to continue to support staff. Even with all of those changes and the expansion in staffing and the cost of living increase, we're still able to present a budget that will actually cost us less in staffing by more than $50,000. So I'm proud of that work. I think it is the work of the Holy Spirit to be able to get us to that place. And it fits in with our direction of trying to both increase the support we give to our congregations and communities and our leaders, both lay and ordained, and also diminishing our financial situation. If I call it a situation, it seems less challenging. But I'm really proud of the staff work the work we've done around the staffing system. Canon Jones, if you could share that the list of the positions, the numbers that we have in terms of how much we anticipate spending on each position are open and transparent and available in the budget itself, and you should have access to that. It's certainly been shared in other places, and I think even following this meeting, it will be shareable and available for you to see. But I'd like to just walk through the list of the positions and explain to you where we are and what we've done and how we've come up with this new configuration that I think accurately reflects the needs of our diocese and again diminishes our costs. I'm going to start at the bottom of this list. And the first thing you see, the two columns, the 2024 preliminary budget staff position on the right is the column of what is right now or what we might have anticipated early on in this process. The 2024 revised budget staff positions on the left. Wait a minute, I'm getting that wrong. On the left of your screen, it's what we originally might have anticipated very early in the year. On the right of your screen is what we're currently planning for and what is reflected in the budget numbers that you will see later. We begin at the bottom. And the reason we're beginning at the bottom is there's a line that says School for Ministry Director Administrator hyphen trustees. That position carried out it's a part-time position, and it is done by the Reverend Jen Bishop, who also serves a congregation. And it has been funded effectively as a staff position, although we haven't really listed her on our website or talked about it as staff. It's been funded through separate grants from the trustees that enable us to do that work, but it really is a staff position and it should be reflected as such. The way we do that is going to change, but I just wanted to name for you that is one of the places where the School for Ministry work was essentially staff work that was not included in the budget that you saw. So we're adding it in and we're still able to save money on some things. The archivist is a stipendiary position. Our diocesan archivist is actually his title is archivist and historiographer. And as Canon Jones mentioned earlier, when churches close or downsize, that the records come to us, and so that position is actually growing as we deal with the materials and the not just the baptism registers, but also when we sell a church property, the fonts and the processional crosses and the vestments and all of that has to be taken care of somewhere, and it is our archivist who takes care of that. We're seeing an increased need for his work because of the ways churches are changing. And we also recognize that the historiographer part of his role, which is capturing and holding not just the records, but the stories, is something that he just doesn't have time for in his current role. Some of our congregations and ministries are doing that work on their own, and it's important that we have a diocesan space in order to hold that as part of our obligations to our diocese. Some of those obligations are canonical, by the way. We're required by the national church to hold on to some of these records, and by our own canons and constitution and canons, and by congregational bylaws. So we do some of this work because we have to, but it's also a good thing for us to do and to support the archivist and historiography with a slight an increase in that position. It's a small increase for us. It's only a few $1,000s, but it will tremendously expand what is possible from that office. Our benefits administrator, that line there, benefits administrator, administrative assistant, we have a diocesan benefits administrator, Ms. Pat Hawkins, who is tremendously gifted and skilled. She does a great job managing pension details, the Episcopal Church Medical Trust, the legal and administrative requirements around the benefits that are offered, not just to diocesan staff, but to clergy and lay leaders across the diocese. So whenever there's a letter of agreement conversation, she's part of that work. Whenever a priest needs medical leave, or someone retires, or there's a change in someone's work or life situation, a family has a new baby, all of that requires the support of the benefits administrator. When I arrived and we looked at the list of folks, we recognized that she was somewhat undercompensated, so we increased that to reflect the work that she does and the value that we find in her work. But that position definitely continues, and we and all our congregations benefit from having her. The caretaker position is the only position on our staff that is an hourly position. The rest are salaried positions or clergy stipendiary. And the caretaker position has increased over the past few years for two reasons, three actually. One, our building is getting older and has increasing challenges. And John Conti, our caretaker, does a fabulous job of attending to needs. I think in the past few months, he saved us at least one call to a plumber and possibly an electrician as well, just by the day-to-day work that he does. Number two, we're using the building differently now. Post-COVID, we're not in the space in quite the same ways. So that does require a bit more care and attention in some ways, because we're not necessarily in and using things as we did. It means that there's a certain amount of maintenance and management that has to happen. And number three, we also recognize that as we, not only are we using the building differently and have an increasingly aging building, we also have had some significant staff transition in the past few months. When Bishop Stokes retired, three other staff retired with him, including Canon Ann Naughty, who was our manager of Diocesan House. And so some of her work there's things there that that John Conti has taken on or has had an increasing responsibility for as he takes care of our property. And he's really wonderful. So another thing we've discovered, it turns out that John's hobby in his spare time has been catering and cooking and preparing food, and he runs a catering business as an extra activity. When we started asking him if he would cater some of our events, we pay his hourly wage and the cost of things. It has saved us thousands of dollars. Instead of spending, $13 on a box lunch from Panera, we were able, for one event, a clergy event this fall, we estimated that we would be spending about $1,200 on the catering from an outside source. John was able to do that and the Hispanic Vocations Conference, two completely different meals in the same week, for a total of both feeding about 80 people for a total of $600. So that's both. It allows him to, it gives him more employment. It allows him to do something he loves. And it is a tremendous gift to us as a diocese. And we're getting great reviews on it as well. So our caretaker position is expanding, but it is both, I think, a wise use of our funds to do that, and also reflects someone who's doing a really good job. The administrative assistant position, that one was budgeted for early on because that was Marianne Clisham's position, which was both data entry and diocesan house receptionist. As mentioned, we're no longer using the building in the same way, which means that having a receptionist on site for much of the week just doesn't make a lot of sense. As well, the data entry portion of her role was important, but we were told by the 3 outgoing staff that they expected that when new people came in and used different data management systems and were inputting information differently, we might actually see some efficiencies there that hadn't been the case in the past. And that has proven to be true. So while 3 people retired and we only replaced 2 of them, we have discovered that position while we certainly miss Marianne, we aren't missing having someone in the roles and doing the functions there, because we've been able to cover those in other areas. And because she'd been with us for almost a decade, that was not a starting level position. So there's certainly some savings, some economies there. Both our staff accountant and our controller are key parts of the finance and administration team. They report to Ken and Phyllis Jones, and they take care of things like billings and ensuring that we've paid we send the funds to our congregations that our congregations depend on so that they can pay people and maintain their buildings and such. They're extensive roles. This is not a small budget. Remember, even with the savings, this current year, it's about $4.5 million. Next year, it is just under $4 million. Plus, we have some administrative work around the investments in the trust accounts and similar. So those 2 positions are a key part of our finance and administration team. They provide support for congregations as well, and are available for things and can be certainly part of our response when there's questions around an audit or similar in a congregation. The bishop's executive assistant position is, while Marianne Rhodes was Bishop Stokes's executive assistant, she worked with me for 1 week, and we both decided that we would claim it because I was her 6th bishop of New Jersey that she had worked with, because she had been in that role for a number of years and was just an excellent, faithful, and helpful presence. It's hard for a diocese to function without an executive assistant for the bishop, because that's the role that keeps everything kind of on track and moving forward. That's the role that allows people to book meetings and helps get visitations planned and manages the calendar and all kinds of things. We brought Morelle White in as my new executive assistant. She started at the beginning of July. She's also wonderful. It's going wonderfully well. And this position is one that, with a different person in it, still continues. However, as I am not Morelle's 6th bishop, but her 1st, recognizing that the seniority that was there before, there's been a bit of an economy around hiring at a different level when we bring new people into positions. Similarly, we hired an interim office and convention manager this summer to step into the work that Ann Naughty had done and help us prepare for various things. We discovered there that there is the ability for us to use data systems a little differently and to streamline some of the processes. So, as mentioned before, replacing 3 positions with 2 has worked out really quite well. It's helped us to see what that position looks like, looks a little differently using some newer technologies and a slightly different approach to some of the work. I think everything continues to be done at the standard we hope for. And we, as mentioned, we've managed to consolidate those positions. So I feel pretty good about those changes and the way that is working for us. If you look on the left column now for communications, we have the title of canon for communications. Our one thing to mention is one of the things this structure does is it reflects increasing clarity on in terms of what the compensation level and the expectations for both a missioner position and a canon level position, as well as canon to the ordinary, which is a different type of position. And the canon for communications really probably should have been a missioner level position. It's around that compensation level, and it always has been. But we recognized that the position was asking too much for any one person. The position really, you have to be supportive of evangelism and telling our story and sharing the good news and proclaiming Christ and all of the missional parts of communications for a diocese and for our churches, as well as managing the social media areas of how we share our story in public and how information is made available and accessible to people who might be seeking to know more about us or about Jesus. There's also the technology aspect of it. In addition to being an evangelist, the Canon for Communications role has also included maintaining the website and ensuring that Zoom meetings go well, and that the the technology platforms for the School for Ministry are handled in a way that is appropriate and works, and everyone can log into their classes. And there's all kinds of different areas of technical stuff that aren't quite the same as the soft skills of evangelism and communications, social media communications. What I'm proposing to do is to continue with a missioner for evangelism and social media as a full-time position, and to separate out a half-time position for the missioner for communications technology, for someone who has the hard skills of the website and the updates that are required, maintaining that aspect of our communications without requiring all of these things of one person. So that one missioner for evangelism and social media is tied to the canon for communications in terms of compensation, etc., and then adding in a half-time position at the level at half-time numbers for that. It expands our communications offerings, and I think makes more sense for us as a diocese. It recognizes the size of our need and the way that could be supported differently in order to equip more stronger work in that area. As we move up our list, when I arrived, we had 2 youth conveners. These were 2 people who were hired by Bishop Stokes in January of 2020, which was a challenging time to begin that work, to convene our youth ministries, the young people of the diocese, the youth leaders and the folks active in youth ministry, families, clergy, lay leaders, congregations, to support the work that was being done in youth ministry. With COVID, the ways that we engage our young people has changed. And we are no longer, it is not enough to convene people. It requires that we have active work to engage in mission and ministry alongside them. So in September, we made the decision to move from having 2 youth conveners to having 1 half-time youth missioner. The youth conveners were quarter-time sort of positions. It wasn't clearly defined, but we added those 2 together, and Claire Gutwine, who was one of our youth conveners, has become our youth missioner for the diocese. In a half-time position, she's active and at work in it. There were young people at the diocesan gathering this weekend, and they're as part of her work. And we continue to do what we need to do to build up and strengthen these ministries, to bring back the energy and the vitality that was really diminished by COVID. This was an area that was especially hard hit. And so having someone on the ground to do that work, I think, is really important. It's in the area of formation, and that's an important theme going through some of the other positions above. So just hold that as one of the areas where we've made some changes already. It happens to have been budget neutral because I added together two quarter-time positions to create 1 half-time position, and with a very small change in the benefits, it was essentially budget neutral. So I'm pleased with that, and I'm pleased with the work that Claire is doing already in that area. As we go further up, the next positions above are in our areas of multicultural ministries. Looking first at the ministries to our Hispanic communities, we currently have a canon missioner to Hispanic churches with a Hispanic administrator. That Hispanic administrator position has been paid by the trustees off the budget. This brings it into the budget and makes it a genuine staff expense of the diocese and recognizes the work that is there. But that position is important because of the language and some of the administrative challenges for our Hispanic ministries. Having a Hispanic administrator is an important way to support the Hispanic ministries across our diocese. Our canon missioner to Hispanic churches is Canon Ramon Ubiera. He's doing a great job. He's also, I'm not entirely comfortable with that title, canon missioner. It almost sounds like you're mostly a canon, but maybe also sort of on the missioner side. And we do use those in a bit of a hierarchical sense. I propose making him into the canon for Hispanic ministries, dropping the missioner to recognize the level at which he is working, and also to create perhaps an invitation for him to do some more of the strategic visioning around our Hispanic ministries in the Diocese of New Jersey. Our Hispanic congregations are some of our fastest growing congregations. You might have seen a few weeks ago, I was at St. John's in Elizabeth, and I confirmed 50 people. Technically, it was 48 confirmations and 3 receptions, so more than 50 people, young people in that one congregation. It was a very large service. It was picked up by the Episcopal News Services because that was such a large service. But that kind of thing is not unusual in our Hispanic communities here. There's tremendous growth and energy, and that's a place we really want to be supporting the growth of the Episcopal Church. We have also currently we have an interim canon missioner to historic Black churches. My proposal there is that we're going to, interim positions are intended to be short term. And as we move into the new year, we will be working to bring on a permanent person. Again, we'll drop the missioner out of that title. I'd like to expand the profile a little bit to be the canon for Black ministries, or perhaps ministries of African descent, depending on the language that we hear from the communities that are members of these communities. In order to do this work well, I'd like for the position description and the search process to receive a great deal of input from and leadership from the congregations of color in our diocese, in particular, the communities, our historically Black churches and our communities of African descent. And so we'll be working on that new call in the new year. I anticipate that position won't simply be responsible for support for the congregations, excuse me, but also for doing work to lift up the profile of those ministries. The Diocese of New Jersey has a long history in the Episcopal Church of being at the leading edge of work on racial justice and ministries to support our congregations of African descent. I think this position will be able to, with some additional support that we don't currently have, will enable us to continue in that way and to continue our commitment to racial justice and support for all our communities. So to accompany the Canon for Black Ministries, I propose the creation of a quarter-time missioner for Black ministries, particularly focused on supporting our historically Black churches. This position, I think, is likely a priest or a deacon who will be equipped simply to be a voice on the ground and a presence to support, to be a bridge, which will enable the Canon for Black Ministries to take some of their time and lift up the profile of this work across the diocese and perhaps into the national church area. As well, we currently have a missioner for Haitian ministries who is working in this diocese, but again, it has been funded through various grants and through the trustees in ways that don't show up in our diocesan budget. He's actually doing great work. It's Father Robin Pierre. He functions part-time at St. Elizabeth's in Elizabeth and then supports our Haitian communities across the diocese. I was up visiting there at the end of October, and we discovered that we had invited them to consider using the space at Good Shepherd Rahway, which is a congregation that had closed. There's an active and engaged Haitian community worshiping there. So we have new communities emerging. We have new congregations emerging because of the work that is happening to support our Haitian communities in New Jersey, and that is a substantial area. That's a ministry we want to encourage and strengthen and support. When you see the budget, you'll notice that there is no dollars line for that. We're going to continue to bring the funding in through the, at least initially, using the model that's currently in place, because it includes some funding, grant funding from the national church, but also from some of our other budget lines. But the goal is to build this into our diocesan budget. The first step is to ensure that Father Robin Pierre is recognized for the work as a member of the staff on behalf of the diocese, and that fits into our support for multicultural ministries there. It is, as I said, not a full-time position, because he is functioning as well at St. Elizabeth's in Elizabeth. Finally, we come to the other canon level positions, including the two of the three positions we are currently receiving names and interviewing for. I apologize for the noise in the background. This is the exact moment my dogs have decided it's time to wrestle. So if anyone barks, please ignore them. I mentioned earlier that the director of the School for Ministry position was one that had been funded off budget, but that we were bringing into the budget. That position, as I mentioned, part-time, has been filled by the Reverend Jen Bishop, who is a priest serving a congregation as well. She has indicated to me that it is her intention to retire, to begin the process to retirement and stepping away from the School for Ministry, and she wants to ensure that there is a strong and healthy plan for leadership transition. I agree with her. I think our formation ministries are important. They are perhaps more important now than they have been for many years, as we try to bring people back to new understandings, new faith formation for people who were somewhat distanced during the pandemic. So my proposal is that we create the position of canon for formation and vocations, not only to encompass the work of director of the School for Ministry and to supervise the staff, the other staff missioner positions in the areas of Christian formation, but also to provide a new capacity for us to support congregations and members in adult formation. That area, excuse me for 1 second, come on. Sorry, I don't know how much dog wrestling you can hear, but it's a little much from this end. So, the canon for formation and vocations has work to do to support, for example, a diocesan-wide confirmation class, something where we could bring together folks who are not able to get local formation where they are for confirmation. And we have congregations that are supported by retired clergy or by very part-time clergy who are just not available to offer a Lenten program or an Advent evening. This position will build that capacity out. It was part of the profile of the canon for congregational development and mission, but it wasn't really an area that his position description allowed him to attend to. So creating a position focused on formation and vocations will be, I think, really helpful for us as a diocese. It would be funded in part through the director of the School for Ministry funding that we have found elsewhere and are now bringing into this list, but it also reflects, as I said, some of the responsibilities from the Canon for Congregational Development and Mission. The vocations aspect of that is important as well. It's not only support for our ordination process, it's also support for conversations across the diocese to help us all to do the work of recognizing our vocation, whether it's to lay leadership or ordained leadership in the church. We're all called in a variety of ways, and getting more familiar with the language and the processes there, I think, will really strengthen us as a diocese. One of my hopes is that this is going to be a way that we can lift up vocations in our multicultural ministries as well. We see tremendous energy there. We will benefit from having someone who's responsible for working with our canons, our other canons, and our other staff to lift this work up. So that position is a new one, but it encompasses areas we have traditionally had it in various ways, but lifts up and creates a structure for us to do more work in formation. I think this will be a real gift to our congregations, because it means that in congregations where this work doesn't currently have someone, we've got a person to help you. In congregations where this work is already happening, we've got additional resources and support. I feel really good about the ways that this is moving forward, and I think it will be a gift to our diocese. The next position is the Canon for Congregational Development, and was the Canon for Congregational Development and Mission position. That was Canon Rob Drosty. His position was at an executive level in the diocese, so along with the Canons of the Ordinary and the Chief Operating Officer, part of the executive group with the bishop. That always struck me as a bit unusual. In fact, the compensation level for this position, if you see the budget from last year, was at a higher level than the Canons of the Ordinary. The program expenses for this position were also very high, the coaching programs and such. So by shifting from that position, which focused on coaching support for clergy and lay leaders to strengthen congregations, towards, having said that, the questions I'm getting, the needs I'm seeing in our congregations are primarily focused on ground level congregational support when there's a conflict, support when there's an opportunity that congregations don't know how to realize, support for clergy and vestries in discerning priorities, vestry training workshops, the kinds of things that we get requests for. As staff and as the bishop, I hear from congregations that they're looking for someone to help them as a community take steps forward in support of the congregation and the work that they are doing. So a Canon for Congregations position really is focused on congregational vitality. It is ground level support. It is a quick bridge between my office and the congregation. It's someone who can be there in a hurry if something happens, if there's an illness or a death among the leadership, if there is a change in situation somehow. This is a bridging role. It is a supporting role, and it is a position that I suspect many congregations won't know that we need until they need this person. But my hope is that we'll be able to strengthen our support offerings through this position. The Chief Financial Officer was part of our staff for a period of 11 months, but that position, we made the decision in July that with the changes in other areas of staffing and recognizing some of the emerging needs of the finance and administration team, that was not the support that was necessary there. So there is a change in the budget related to that position, which again was a fairly high technical qualifications and a relatively expensive position for us to have. So we are not replacing that position, having made the decision that we are managing our finance and administration support in other ways. The final two positions I'd like to mention here are the what currently is the interim Canon to the Ordinary and Transition Officer for the diocese, and the Chief Operating Officer. These two positions both become Canon to the Ordinary level positions, one for mission, the other for administration and finance. We do have an interim person in the Canon to the Ordinary transition role right now. She finishes that is Canon Joanne Izzo, and she finishes later this week. Her letter of agreement, her contract went through the year, and she's taking some time of vacation as she winds down with the holiday season. So that position, we are currently searching for the permanent person for that role. My vision in bringing these two positions together as both as canons to the ordinary is that it creates a uniform structure. It allows us to see how the executive staffing of the diocese works with much more clarity. And both of these positions lead and supervise the various areas that they oversee. The administration and finance, that is, of course, Canon Phyllis Jones, and she's doing wonderful work in that area. By creating that as the Canon to the Ordinary position, I think we'll really see how that fits in with our mission and our structure. And then for the other, the programmatic staff, in a way, mission's a bit of a misnomer because everything we do is part of God's mission, but it helps us to distinguish between program support and administrative financial support. So this is the staffing for next year, I hope, pending December 9th budget process. The final one on there is Bishop, and I'm here. I'm very glad to be here. I'm honored to serve and look forward to many years of this work. Ken and Phyllis, if you could make that go away, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you. I just talked at you for about 35 minutes, so apologize, but there is a lot in there.
Well, you must have talked very thoroughly and very clearly, because I'm not seeing anybody with any questions, comments. I'm seeing some thumbs up here and there.
Thanks. Well, the one thing I have to say is that I have wrestled with the staffing structure here, and the staffing structure is primarily, it sort of lands on the bishop, but it's funded through the diocesan budget. So it's a push-pull, give and take kind of relationship. I wrestled with it, and I sat with it. I prayed, I struggled, and I woke up one Tuesday morning at the end of August with absolute clarity around the staff structure. And it just feels like the right thing for us. I'm going to take that as a gift of the Holy Spirit. And it feels like it'll carry us forward in the ways we need to go. We haven't added any new areas. We haven't, there's a couple of areas we really probably should be thinking about at some point. One is we may need some staff work around stewardship and development because of our financial situation, et cetera. The other is we don't have a position that is responsible for justice and for the work that we are already doing in those areas. Every position has some responsibility for that, but it would be interesting to see over time how that might change and morph and how our priorities may shift in that area. I think this is a good structure that allows us to increase the support we provide to congregations, clergy, and lay leaders. And as I mentioned in our budget numbers for this year, it's going to cost us $52,000 less for 2024 than it is costing us for 2023. So.
And on that note, I am just going to very briefly share again our diocesan budget so that you can see how this translates into the numbers that show up on the budget document itself. So if we take a look, there will be a number of positions like the bishop's position, where you'll see that the only change there reflects the cost of living increase that we talked about, from what we anticipated in preliminary to the 2024 revised. And this obviously is one of the areas where in 2023 we also had to budget for about a 3-month overlap, which is part of the reason why there is a significant decrease from 2023. But if you compare what we were anticipating in 2024 from what we actually have in the revised budget, that's where you see this comparison here. So, as noted, the canon to the ordinaries position this would be what was called, and we'll update our captions here too as soon as we know we have approval on everything. This would be the canon to the ordinary for mission. And then we have what we now call my position, the chief operating officer, would be the canon to the ordinary for administration and finance. And then the chief financial officer, you can see where we had amounts budgeted here that we no longer have that in the budget. And then some areas where we have positions that have been created that were not in the prior budget but are in the revised budget. So as you go through, you'll see a little bit of all of that going on within all the different budget areas. So here you can see the Hispanic administrator, the canon for formation and vocations, and you'll also notice, as Bishop French talked about, that you'll see a clearer sort of a definition of the salary levels that go along with the different canon positions, the missioner positions, things like that. So here's our canon missioner for youth and young adults, which will now be our youth missioner, which will now be just one person rather than two. The canon for Black ministries, or however that ends up getting renamed, at that same canon level. The missioner for Black ministries at the same level as the other missioner positions, or some of the missioner positions that are the quarter time ones. And then our missioner for evangelism and social media, which was the canon for communications position, and then this half-time position for a missioner for communications technology. And then this the canon for congregational development and mission will no longer exist as we knew it before. So those budget line items all went to zero. And then we have our administrative staff, which again is a bit of a decrease from what we anticipated before. And then all of our other expenses that go along with that as far as benefits are concerned. Again, it has resulted in, with all of that together, the ultimate savings that we've realized isn't fully reflected just on the budget document, because as Bishop French stated, there was some significant amounts that were of these staffing positions that were being funded by the trustees. So they haven't shown up anywhere on either the 2023 or 2024 preliminary budget. But we did save at least $50,000 in the staffing positions, even with adding the positions that we've added. And this budget document already does appear on the website, so you can feel free, along with the prior recordings that we have done of the prior sessions, as well as, as soon as it's ready, tonight's session will also be posted on the website. So then that way you can go out and get a copy, not only of the budget document, but also that staff restructuring document, if you want to print it out ahead of the special convention. So with all of that said, are there any final comments or questions that anybody would like to make? Seeing none, thank you so much. Thank you for taking time out of your Sunday evening to be with us and to learn more about everything that is behind the numbers that you see. And, for all of your diligent attention. I know that's a lot to sort of have thrown at you in a fairly short period of time. Deb, I see that you have your hand raised. How can we help you?
I want to just say thank you. I acknowledge the extraordinary work that went into this. Anyone that has served on vestry and been responsible for budget and finance acknowledges that there's a lot of painful decisions that have to be made, and you've made them. And I think it's wise. And I just wanted to acknowledge that I appreciate your work.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. It was, and again, I also, at the same time, do want to lift up finance and budget and the Board of Missions as part of those to whom we also owe that debt of gratitude, as they have also wrestled with having to make some very difficult decisions on the way to where we are, to what we just reviewed. So again, thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful, relaxing rest of your Sunday evening. And yes, Susanna, I will be happy to pass on thanks to Jonathan. I would like to then pass it back to Bishop French to close us out in prayer.
The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, you have bestowed upon us many gifts in this, the Diocese of New Jersey. We thank you for our congregations, for our lay leaders, our clergy, and our people, and for the ways that you are at work changing, challenging, and encouraging us. We thank you for being with us in this budget process and for guidance as we continue to do our best to make good and faithful decisions. And we pray, Lord, that as we go from this meeting, you will keep us strong, keep us faithful, and strengthen us to continue in your service. This we ask in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Amen. And I see up in my right-hand corner, Gail Bennett is here with us. Maybe Excellent. She would dismiss us.
Surely.
Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
God.
Thank you, everyone, and good night. God bless you.
Thanks.
God bless you.